than you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
We're all getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you made the pass, yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 20. Thanks for joining me. Go to inallairness.com for show notes and plenty more features. The social hub for the podcast is facebook.com/inallairness. If you haven't already, please like the page and join the growing community of fans. Add the podcast to your RSS feed or iTunes so you never miss another show. It's also available on Stitcher, BlackBerry, Player FM, TuneIn Radio, and numerous other podcatchers. I love hearing from listeners. On either site, you can send voicemail comments or questions. With your permission, I'd love to include your feedback on future episodes. You can follow me on Twitter @InAllAirness.
My guest today is the first to make a repeat visit on the show. I'm thrilled to have him back, remarkably on his own will. He's a long-time play-by-play announcer for the Brooklyn Nets, formerly New Jersey. Iron Eagle, thanks for rejoining me.
What an honor. A two-time guest. This is unprecedented.
Exactly right. I really appreciate your time, and I know you've been very busy today with multiple interviews, so thanks for finding time to speak to a guy in Australia.
My pleasure.
Today we'll be dissecting the 2013 NBA playoffs, which commence in just a matter of days. Right off the bat, do you anticipate sleeping more than 5 hours a night for the next 40 days?
No, I don't, which is the best part of the whole equation. You're fired up. Your adrenaline is pumping. If you're an NBA fan, you know that there's going to be action every single night, and that's what makes this part of the season so terrific. And I just think we've got intriguing matchups this year. It came down to the final day of the regular season to determine a number of the spots, and the NBA has some outstanding storylines developing here to get the playoffs underway.
Yeah, it's really an exciting time for basketball fans right around the world, so there's going to be a great playoff series coming up. Now, what's your involvement TV-wise during the playoffs, Iron, or is that going to be determined by how far Brooklyn advances?
Yeah, it's a combination of factors. I will do the Nets home telecast, as I've been doing for the last number of years, and it's the first time they're in the playoffs for 6 years, so it's nice to be back on that side of it. The Nets taking on the Chicago Bulls, so we'll cover every game on a local basis. And then I'll also do some national television here in the United States. I'm working the Oklahoma City, Houston, Game 1 of that series, and I've got Atlanta and Indiana, Game 2 of that series on TNT and NBA TV.
Fantastic. So you're going to be right in amongst the thick of things as the playoffs develop, which is great too.
Yeah, and for me, it's a lot of fun on both levels. The local angle, when the Nets made the finals for the first time back in the 01-02 season, there was just a lot of joy around the team. People that had worked for the franchise for many, many years, people who had suffered through so many losing seasons. So to see just ecstasy that would come over not only the team, the players, the coaching staff, but all the people behind the scenes. So that was really enjoyable to watch that run. And then on a national level, where you don't necessarily have a rooting interest, you're just going in there as an interested observer, unbiased observer, and you get to watch the best players in the world go at it with the stakes very high. And that Oklahoma City-Houston series as an example, and that style of play is just fantastic to watch and really a lot of fun to broadcast.
Yeah, for sure. And just quickly touching on that series, it's going to be interesting to see James Harden up against his former team, the OKC Thunder. What do you actually make of that series? How long do you think it may go into the later stages of that first round?
Yeah, I think for Houston, unfortunately, they drew probably their toughest matchup of all the potential matchups in the Western Conference. They're more or less mirror images of one another, except Oklahoma City is a better version of the Rockets. The Rockets don't have a whole lot of playoff experience. Harden, obviously, is a guy that brings his playoff experience that he acquired from the Thunder. He had an incredible run last year in the postseason, and he opened a lot of eyes around the NBA, but did not play well in the NBA Finals. The Thunder made the decision to go in a different direction, not give him the guaranteed maximum contract and make the deal as they did with Houston. And they got a very good player back in Kevin Martin. They've got some young players and future picks. But ultimately, that was a huge, huge move by Oklahoma City. They basically said, we've got to change the direction. We know that we've got the combination of Durant and Westbrook, but we believe that the supporting cast is good enough to maintain this upward trend. Well, they made the finals last year. Anything short of a championship is probably going to be considered a disappointment. I don't know if they're better than they were a year ago, but they feel that they're ready and they're experienced now to take that next step as a team.
Yeah, well said. It'll be an intriguing series to see how well Harden can play on the big stage against those former teammates of his. Now, I've got a few quick-fire questions I'd like to throw at you just in relation to the NBA season that's passed. The regular season's now behind us.
Sure.
There's only 5 quick questions, but each question has 7 parts. Is that okay? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I enjoy the detailed questions where I can really dig in. Normally, I like double figures. I'd like to have 10 parts to each question next time, Adam.
All right, I'll see how I go. That first one, Stephen Curry. Now, he's just a fourth-year player, but is there any better pure shooter in the NBA at the moment?
No, there isn't. He's the best pure shooter in the NBA. We know where the genes come from. His dad, Del Curry, when he played in the NBA, was among the best shooters in the league. I think the questions about Stephen coming out of Davidson were whether or not he could physically handle the wear and tear of this league. And there were still questions about that heading into this season. But for the most part, he's remained relatively healthy, and he's an offensive force. He is absolutely lethal from the perimeter, best shooter in the NBA right now.
Yeah, no doubt. And that game against the Lakers only last week, which he almost hit that Hail Mary 70-footer to force, or to win the game, or to force overtime. I can't remember what it was. That was an incredible performance when he got those 47 points on an array of amazing moves.
And I would tell you that his performance against the Knicks was even better.
Yeah,
that's the incredible thing. He did it. Think about who he did it against. The 2 biggest media markets in the United States at Madison Square Garden. Incredible performance. And then to do it against the Lakers, which happened to be the game where Kobe Bryant went down with the season-ending Achilles injury.
Yeah, very true. Now, the next question is about Tim Duncan, the big fundamental. Was his season sponsored by the Fountain of Youth or Scher's Turn Back Time?
Well, I think it's interesting in how Greg Popovich handles his team, because he might upset season ticket holders and networks and media members and the league and the commissioner. But in the end, he has the best interest of his team at heart. And that's why you see him handle Tim Duncan the way that he does. Tim Duncan has been a dominant figure in this league. I don't know if we're ever going to see anybody quite like him again, just based on the fact his style, his demeanor, his professionalism at that position. It's just astounding what he's been able to accomplish. But with all of that said, Adam, I don't know how the San Antonio team is going to handle this postseason run. Obviously, with the schedule, you do get some time off. It's not back-to-back. You get those days for travel. You get some practice time in. Greg Popovich has been a master of putting the pedal to the metal and then putting the brake on when necessary. But Manu Ginobili, he just is one of those guys that is putting his body through such a taxing experience every time he goes on the court. He's banging body. He's going down. He's hitting the deck. He's going for the full extension and leaving his feet while a body is flying towards him to block the shot. He's absorbing that. You just don't know with him. You don't know if he's going to be able to sustain it throughout the postseason. Tony Parker, his style of play, circling around, driving to the rim, going back outside, doing it all over again, getting hit by centers as he penetrates to the basket. This is just a very demanding way to play the game, and you just hope after the season they put together that the Spurs can keep it together and remain healthy.
Yeah, that's true. The key word there is healthy, so hopefully they can keep that core unit together, and definitely if they do that, they're going to go a long way deep into the playoffs, that's for sure. Now, my third question for you, Ian, is Carmelo Anthony a legitimate MVP candidate in your opinion?
I think he's a candidate, legitimate candidate. He won't win. LeBron James will win in a landslide once again. The totality of LeBron's season is just too much for Carmelo Anthony to surpass. Carmelo Anthony will get votes. He'll get a bunch of second-place votes. Kevin Durant will also get a number of second-place votes. But in the end, there'll be a wide disparity between LeBron James and everybody else. I think the one thing you must say about Carmelo this year, more than any other year, he's improved his all-around abilities. He's still a gifted scorer, number one in the NBA in that category. But he's become a better passer. I think he's got more of the team concept when he hits the floor. And this supporting cast, although it's not littered with all-stars, it's a good fit. And I think the chemistry has been very strong for this Knicks team, which has allowed Carmelo to take over games when necessary. And then other times, J.R. Smith has been able to make big shots. They've got the right pieces in place. The only question now that you have, they've never done it collectively as a unit. And against the Boston Celtics, although these are not the same Boston Celtics that you remember, that I remember, that won a championship recently with Garnett and Pierce and Ray Allen. But Garnett and Pierce are still there. So in the waning moments of a big game, one-possession game, 10 seconds left, Garnett and Pierce can look at one another, and there's a body of work that they can draw upon in the playoffs. The Knicks don't have that. They're learning as they go. They're trying to gain that experience as they go. They are absolutely the favorite in this series, but it's the one aspect that you never quite know until you see it on the floor, and that's what we're waiting to see with the Knicks. Can they develop that toughness and that chemistry that you need to win multiple rounds in the playoffs?
Yeah, very well said. Now, do you think that Derrick Rose will finally make #the return during these playoffs?
Yeah, that's the $80 million question right now. The Nets are playing the Bulls. The Bulls that we know under Tom Thibodeau are tough, defensive-minded, physical, all-out effort. The only real concern with them is who's going to be on the court. You just don't know. Joakim Noah has been dealing with injuries. Taj Gibson, Richard Hamilton, Marco Bellinelli, and obviously the biggest name of all, Derrick Rose, who has not played a single game. We tend to forget, Adam, 1 year ago, the Chicago Bulls were the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. This was before Miami won an NBA championship. The Bulls felt they had a legitimate claim to going on an NBA title run, and all of those dreams were crushed when Derrick Rose went down with a horrific leg injury against the Philadelphia 76ers. So here we are, 1 year removed from that. Rose is yet to play in a game since that injury. The Bulls somehow squeezed out the number 5 seed this year. Tom Thibodeau, one of the best coaches in the NBA. And I think that question still exists. Can Derrick Rose play a Willis Reed type role and come running, jogging through the tunnel onto the court in uniform to help lead the Chicago Bulls? It's one of those things that the team is yet to tell you one way or the other. Rose is yet to tell you one way or the other. So the mystery remains alive. He very well could play in this series, Adam.
It's very intriguing because the Bulls, as you said, and even himself, he hasn't shut himself down and said he's definitely out. There's been talk on and off about him coming back. So that's another really interesting question that will be answered, I guess, in the next week or so for sure. Now, one more quick question about the NBA season in general. Was Kobe Bryant's Achilles injury the biggest story of the season for you?
Yeah, I think when the smoke cleared, yes, because he has been one of those guys that the Lakers could depend upon every single year. Played through pain, different teammates, revolving door of teammates now over time, multiple championships, an incredible pairing with Shaquille O'Neal, greatness, records, all of it.
Yep.
You kind of just figured he was invincible, that this wouldn't happen to him, and it did. I don't know. I know there are people that have been trying to connect the cause and effect, the amount of minutes that he's played, how much has been asked of him this year in this very trying roller coaster season with Dwight Howard, Pau Gasol, Mike D'Antoni, and the soap opera that's gone on in L.A. For me, it was a freak injury. These things happen. You just didn't think it would ever happen to Kobe Bryant. So, yeah, it changes everything because with Kobe Bryant, you've got a puncher's chance in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Now the Lakers would really have to get down to business to truly win a series against San Antonio. Not to say that they won't compete, not to say that they won't win games against the Spurs. I think they will. Dwight Howard is a star in his own right, but he's going to deal with a lot of pressure, and it's a different kind of pressure for him. The pressure he had in Orlando is nowhere close to the pressure that he will feel in L.A. They expect greatness. They expect championships. There's an elite kind of feeling when you walk around that arena. Orlando, if they got through the first round, if they got to the second round, if they ever made it to the conference finals, that was considered a victory. That was considered a success. That's just not the case in L.A. It's a different set of circumstances that he's facing compared to all of the other years when he went to the playoffs with the Magic.
Yeah, correct. And the expectations in LA are certainly almost off the charts. So that'll be another intriguing series to see how well they go. Now, if it's okay with you, I'd just like to quickly break down some of the first round matchups, and then we might try and piece together who may advance to the second, third round and beyond. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
That sounds great.
Great. Okay, so let's just start off by chatting about the Eastern Conference, and we'll look at the 1 versus 8 matchup. It's Miami versus Milwaukee. Now, the Heat entered the playoffs with a 9-1 record in their last 10 games, and they sat that many players that Ronnie Cycli and Rory Sparrow came off the bench in that last week. But the Bucks went 3-7 in their last 10 games. So the only commonality I can see between these teams is the first 2 letters of their city names. Now, other than that, do you see Milwaukee even stealing one game against the Heat, Iron?
There is no truth to the rumor that Miami is going to rest LeBron, Wade, and Bosh for this series. I believe they will play, although there are many people that believe they could actually rest those guys and still probably win a best-of-7 against Milwaukee. Yeah, this is one of those cases where in what probably would be a normal season, the Bucks wouldn't make the playoffs. They did. Coaching change. Jim Boylan takes over. It's a talented backcourt, smallish group, very tough matchups for Milwaukee with Jennings and Monte Ellis. That's the challenge in general for Milwaukee. They've got those smaller, quicker guards. They'll put some points on the board against Miami. There's no doubt about that. Can they steal one game? Yes, I think they can steal one game. I don't think this series goes more than 5.
Yeah, I think that's most people's thinking as well, for sure. Now, let's have a look at the 4 versus 5 matchup. Your Brooklyn team up against the Chicago Bulls. Now, I'm picking the Nets to win this series in 6 games, and it begins on Saturday. First, how do you actually rate Brooklyn's regular season? They finished just 1 win shy of that 50-win mark, and they've got the home court edge in this series, and PJ Carlissimo guided the Nets to a 35-19 record after he took over from Avery Johnson.
Yeah, you've got to definitely keep things in perspective in regards to the Nets. A year ago, this team was nowhere. They had no core, they had no plan, and it all hinged upon Dwight Howard. A year later, the team has won 49 games. They have home court advantage in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. They moved into a new home. They changed their logo. They changed their team colors. They changed their city. They changed their entire roster. And here they are. They're a legitimate, relevant team in the NBA. So first and foremost, you've got to recognize that that's not easy to do. It's just not that easy to go from being one of the bottom feeders in the NBA to being one of the top 4 seeds in your conference. With all of that being said, I think they believe they left a lot of wins on the table because Deron Williams, through the first 50 games of the regular season, did not resemble the same player that we saw in the final 27 games of the regular season. He played 77 games. He had serious issues with his ankles. All-Star break, sat out a couple of games prior to it, and it really did him a lot of good. He was able to get treatment on those ankles, some shots on those ankles. He lost probably 15 pounds, and he looked like a different player. He looked like the all-star Deron Williams, and that's when this team began to win consistently. Brook Lopez developed into a legitimate all-star this year. A year ago, he played just 5 games because of foot injuries, and now Brook Lopez is one of the best centers in the NBA. Joe Johnson has a playoff resume, has won games in the playoffs, literally has won them with buzzer beaters. He's got a knack for making big shots. This team feels pretty confident and comfortable about where they are. They're playing their best basketball at the right time of the season. The issue for them will be this matchup. The Bulls, they don't give any possessions away. They make you earn everything out there on the court. So this will be a hard-fought series, major battle between these two teams. The Bulls won the regular season series with a mark of 3-1. I think the Nets believe that they should win this series, but similar to what we said earlier about the New York Knicks, this group has never done it together. This is their first experience as a playoff team together, collectively. So we've got to see how they respond to that kind of pressure and that kind of drama.
You've set the scene beautifully there, and now you mentioned all those changes that have happened to the franchise over the last 12 months. It's really an incredible feat that they've locked up the 4th seed in the East.
Yeah, and also give credit to a bunch of players that any team in the NBA could have had. Andre Blatch was amnestied by Washington. Any team in the league could have had him. He ended up with the Nets. Jerry Stackhouse, a veteran. Most people thought, well, he's just going to retire, go into broadcasting, become a coach. The Nets saw something. They signed him, and he's provided a necessary role. Reggie Evans, he was acquired for a trade exception from the Clippers. Reggie Evans has been the best rebounder in the NBA if you're just going to go off minutes played compared to what his season average is. He's averaging 11 boards per game. And then Keith Bogans, who had a terrible leg injury of his own last year. Many people question whether or not he'd be able to make it back to the NBA and be a productive player. The Nets saw something in him as a glue guy, someone that could connect with the star players but also relate to the role players and the younger players. And he's been an excellent leader for this team in the locker room. So you don't just win it with your star players. You've got to have a supporting cast that fits the plan. And the philosophy from Billy King was go out and put together a reputable team and hope that they develop chemistry. Took a little bit of time. Avery Johnson lost his job in December because it wasn't happening quickly enough. P.J. Carlesimo takes over, and here they are now as the number 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, going up against the team that was the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference just a year ago.
Yeah, they've come together as a collective, and this will be a really interesting series to watch. Now, in a perfect world, there's a possibility, an outside possibility, the Nets and Knicks could meet in the conference finals. I know it's jumping the gun incredibly, but just the thought of that would be quite enticing, but yet Brooklyn would need to dispose of Miami in round 2.
Yeah, I think for now, all they're worried about is Chicago. You're right. For this city, for New York City, I'm based in this area, this would be just spectacular for basketball fans to experience something like that. For the rivalry to really take on a life of its own, I think it requires playoff series, multiple meetings in the playoffs over time. That's where rivalries truly develop. But for now, Knicks are focused on Boston. The Nets are focused on Chicago. Moving forward, a lot would have to happen for that to actually occur.
Yeah, very true. I just thought I'd throw it out there because in our previous chat, we did briefly touch on the fact that if they did meet come playoff times, it would certainly just deepen that incredible cross-city rivalry. Now, the next series I'd like to have a quick look at, Iron, it's Indiana versus the Atlanta Hawks. It's a 3 versus 6 matchup. I'm going to pick the Pacers here in a 6 games. I think it may go to 6 games, perhaps. Unless Josh Smith goes into some sort of beast mode often and early, I can't see the Hawks taking out this series. But it should be noted that Frank Vogel has had a really solid year as coach of the Pacers. What are your thoughts on this particular matchup?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's probably the matchup that's getting the least amount of attention right now if you take the temperature of NBA fans. And that has a lot to do with the teams involved. Atlanta is just one of those teams that's tough to figure out. You can't quite get a read on them. There are some nights where they look like world beaters. And as you said, Josh Smith, when he can shift it into another gear, he's one of the most talented players in the NBA. The inconsistencies have plagued this team. Jeff Teague has had a brilliant season, and I think he's been one of the most improved players in the NBA. They've given him a lot of responsibility. Larry Drew, the head coach of the Hawks, handed him the basketball and said, run the show, and he's been able to do that. Horford, Smith, Devin Harris, there are pieces in place, but I just don't know if they've got the wherewithal to go on any kind of extended run. They go against an Indiana team that they're willing to play ugly basketball. They're willing to limit the possessions. Frank Vogel has done excellent work with this team. He has recognized that there were some flaws, and he's addressed them. Danny Granger, they don't even have the guy that was supposed to be their leading scorer. What happens? Paul George turns into an all-star this year, a workman-like player like David West. Hibbert, obviously, one of the more imposing defensive players in the league. George Hill is a hybrid guard, and he can hurt you in a number of different ways. Lance Stevenson has matured very quickly now in his 3rd year in the league. So Indiana finds a way. It's not always pretty. It's not always a work of art, but when you look up at the end of the game, they somehow beat you by 5 points, 92-87.
Yeah.
They're willing to play that style. They're willing to play low-scoring affairs, and they feel good about their chances late in the game if it comes down to execution. That's one of the better execution teams in the league.
Yeah, for sure. And that style of play did help them land that number 3 seed, so they're obviously doing a lot of things right. Now, the last matchup in the Eastern Conference first round, talked about it briefly already, 2 versus 7. It's the New York Knicks taking on the Boston Celtics. I'm thinking that the Knicks will probably get this series in maybe 5 or 6 games, perhaps. It begins this Saturday as well, and it proves to be quite an intriguing series depending on which Boston team turn up in terms of injuries and coming together as a team, but we know what they can do come playoff time. What do you think about this, and who has the edge here, Ian?
Knicks certainly have the edge. They're a team that knows how to put up points. Carmelo Anthony has become a superstar in this league. The real question with Boston is, without a true point guard, Rajon Rondo obviously out for the season with the ACL injury, without a true point guard, you're asking Paul Pierce to do even more than you would normally ask, and that's saying a lot at this point of his career, advanced age, a lot of mileage on that body.
Yeah.
I just don't know if Doc Rivers can get enough out of Pierce and Garnett right now. If you turn back the clock 3 years ago, the Boston Celtics probably would be the favorite in this series, no matter what the records were. But they just don't have enough pieces in my mind. Jeff Green has become a productive NBA player, more consistent. I think he is one of the building blocks for this franchise. That was probably the one thing they needed to learn this year, whether or not Jeff Green was a true keeper. Avery Bradley, defensive presence, on-the-ball defender, maybe the best in the NBA at that. But I just don't think they're going to be able to outscore the Knicks when push comes to shove. Maybe 6 games. I know you said somewhere in that 5 area. I think it could be 6. I think Boston could win 2 games just based on their guile and their experience.
Yeah, exactly. And when they head back to Boston to play a couple of games there as well, that will certainly raise their intensity levels, even that extra couple of percentage points, I'm sure. So let's quickly get stuck into the Western Conference. I know you're pressed for time, and I won't delay things too much more, but thanks again for speaking with me. We've got the first round matchup, 1 versus 8, which we did touch on at the start, the OKC Thunder up against the Houston Rockets. I'm thinking that the Thunder will probably get through in about 5 games. This series begins on Sunday, and OKC had a 2-1 series edge in the regular season, and their 2 wins were by a margin of 22 and 30 points respectively. So Houston did have a great season, as we said, led by James Harden, who pretty much pulled them into the playoffs. What do you make of the series, and how many games do you think Houston can last?
Yeah, I think the most difficult thing for Houston is going into Oklahoma City and trying to win a game. Right now, Adam, in the NBA, the environment inside that arena is number one. There's no other venue that produces the volume and the intensity compared to Oklahoma City. It's like a college basketball atmosphere.
Yeah.
Those fans are fully engaged from the opening tip. They're cheering, they're screaming, they're up on their feet, and they love their Thunder basketball. I think that's a challenge for anybody. Having that number 1 seed gives them a huge edge in every series that they play, just based on the fact that they're going to have home court advantage. Houston, really a nice story, and Kevin McHale has done incredible work as the head coach of that team, meshing that team together, melding those pieces. They took a big chance. Let's think about that, Adam. Jeremy Lin and Omer Asik, they paid a lot of money for those 2 guys. They back-ended those deals, almost the poison pill, so that the Knicks and the Chicago Bulls, respectively, couldn't match the offers. They take another big risk in getting James Harden. They remake their roster. And the combination of Lin, Harden, Parsons, Asik, Greg Smith, Mota Yunus, this team, to me, is someone to keep an eye on now over time. I like what they've done. They've become one of the more exciting teams in the NBA. They just got a really bad draw.
Yeah, they've lucked out, unfortunately, in terms of where they've ended up in seeding-wise. But yeah, OKC Thunder, when you've called games there, you've described how obsessed the fans seem to be. I can imagine it'd be a very intimidating thing for a team trying to get their first bucket or 2 of the game and having those fans so rowdy.
Yeah, it really is the closest thing that you would find to a collegiate atmosphere like Duke, which I'm sure you've been able to see on television over time or on the Internet, where the fans are in your face, the fans are very vocal. It doesn't cross the line, though. It is still respectful. They're good basketball fans. I think a lot of it, not to get into a sociological discussion, but I think a lot of it is the fact that Oklahoma City, for many years here in the United States, people didn't really consider that a big-time city. They thought it was kind of a small town. And when they finally had the chance to be an NBA city, they took it and ran with it. It was almost like a collective effort from that community to show the rest of the country that Oklahoma City is the real deal. So they take it personally. They really care about that team, and I think it defines that city and that community in many ways. And that's what sports is all about. To me, if you can identify, if you can take pride in your team, that means that there's a symbiotic relationship going on between the local team and the people of that city.
Very true. Now, 3 more quick series to touch on before we wrap things up. We've got the 4 versus 5 matchup with the Clippers and Memphis in a rematch of last season's first round, which went to 7 games, which the Clippers held on to win in Memphis. This time round, I'm thinking the Clippers are probably going to be too strong again and maybe take out the series in perhaps 6 games, but it should be a really fun series. What do you think about that one?
Very pivotal series for both franchises. The Clippers believe they've taken the next step. They conquered L.A. They are, for the first time ever, the best team in Los Angeles. That's not something to sneeze at. That took a lot of effort. It took a lot of vision, the way they built that team. Last year they did handle Memphis. If the Clippers don't handle Memphis this year, Vinny Del Negro could be out of a job.
Yeah.
That's how big this series is. On the flip side with Memphis, the Grizzlies believe that they have somehow had addition by subtraction. By getting rid of Rudy Gay, they believe they're better equipped to go on an extended playoff run because now the offense is going to run through the post, and the combination of Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol. With Rudy Gay, it was always a little bit of a battle. Who's the go-to guy? Well, there are no questions anymore. The go-to guys are down low. But you leave yourself open for a fairly major question. If you lose the series, what's the first thing people are going to ask? Why'd you get rid of Rudy Gay?
Yeah, that's right.
You were lacking a go-to scorer in a key moment. Rudy Gay does have the ability to make big shots in big moments. So I find this series fascinating because you've got 2 teams that, based on the result of this series, are going to make some pretty bold determinations about what direction they're headed in and whether or not they need to make some major changes to what their philosophy is.
Yeah, definitely. And that trade of Rudy Gay was certainly a pivotal moment in Memphis' season, so it will be very interesting to see if they progress beyond that first round and to make that decision justified. So we'll see what happens there. That will be a great matchup. Now, 2 more to touch on. Denver versus Golden State. It's number 3 versus 6 seed, and this series, even though we're talking playoffs, I'm thinking that the scores will probably enter into the 110, 115 points a game, no doubt. Really high-octane, fast-paced style of play. What do you think about this one? I'm probably thinking that the Nuggets will escape in probably 5 or 6 games in this one, I'd say.
Yeah, let me give you full disclosure. Mark Jackson, the head coach of the Golden State Warriors, is one of my best friends and a former broadcast partner of mine. I love the guy. I think he has really shown what he's capable of as a head coach because I think it was his attitude that those players were able to feed off of this year. He's got a confidence about him. He's always had a chip on his shoulder. As a player, he had to do a little bit more to squeeze out whatever ability he had in his body, and he did it for a number of teams. He's a leader. He's a natural leader. And you look at that team, the fact that Andrew Bogut was really not a part of it for most of the year.
Yes.
For them to do what they did this year and take that big jump is saying something. Now, a lot of it had to do with Stephen Curry and his development as a star player. But David Lee had a brilliant year. And that team, they've got something about them. There's something about that team that catches your eye. They're going up against the Denver team. I feel terrible about the Danilo Gallinari injury because I would have loved to have seen Denver at full strength in the Western Conference playoffs and see them on even footing against a San Antonio or against an Oklahoma City or against the Clippers. Unfortunately for Denver, they don't have the full complement of players. That doesn't change their style. Ty Lawson, one of the most improved players in the NBA, might be the fastest player baseline to baseline in the league. I think it's between him. John Wall would probably enter that equation as well from Washington.
Yeah.
Kenneth Faried, what a joy to watch. His effort level, the man known as the Manimal, has been something to behold. I think Denver wins this series, but I think this series could go the distance. I believe Golden State can compete with Denver. I think they've got the right attitude. The only thing they lack is experience. Most of these guys are going to be going through it for the first time. So as we talked about with some other teams, you never quite know how a team reacts when that bright light is being shined on top of them.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Now, the final matchup we'd like to quickly touch on, and we have mentioned it already, it's the Spurs versus Lakers, number 2 versus 7 seed. I'm thinking that the Spurs will probably get ahead in 5 games thereabouts. This series begins on Sunday. Now, minus Kobe, it's obviously going to be very difficult for the Lakers. Can you see the Lakers stealing 1 or 2 perhaps in LA?
Yeah, I think that would be the limit. If this went 6 games, that would be a pretty good accomplishment for the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't know if the Lakers are just going to get blown out of these games. That game 1 is going to be a really interesting tone setter.
Yes.
That's a tough place to go play, as we know, in San Antonio. But there have been some cracks in the armor with the Spurs this year. Even when they've been at full strength, there have been some moments where they've really had to fight and claw and scratch to get victories. Greg Popovich knows his team so well. He knows the buttons to push. Mike D'Antoni, this is still part of the learning process with him and this group. He was not the coach through training camp. Mike Brown was fired early in the season.
Yeah.
Everybody thought Phil Jackson was going to take the job, and lo and behold, Mike D'Antoni gets the phone call to come in and take over as the head coach. And there have been a lot of bumps along the way and bumping heads between Dwight Howard and Kobe Bryant. Well, Dwight Howard has no excuses now. Kobe's not there. So it's going to fall on him. It's going to fall on Pau Gasol. Meta World Peace is going to have to play a big role. Steve Blake, Steve Nash, all of these guys are really going to have to step forward if this Laker team is going to have any chance to truly compete with San Antonio.
Yeah, indeed. And Dwight Howard certainly now has the opportunity to try and show his wares and show the LA fans and NBA fans in general just how good of a player he is now that they don't have Kobe in the lineup as well. So, yeah, interesting matchups all around in this first round collection of games. Now, out of the East, is it hard to look past the Heat? They had a 66-16 record and obviously blitzed their way through the season, had a massive win streak. Can you see anybody upsetting the Heat on their way to the NBA Finals?
Well, I don't think the Knicks are intimidated by Miami. I just don't know if they would have enough to beat them in a 7-game series. Miami is not going to go undefeated in the Eastern Conference playoffs. There will be some nights where they just don't have it and it's not clicking, but I don't think there will be a lot of those nights. Miami is the prohibitive favorite. There's a reason why they're the defending champions, and in my mind, last year, Adam, it was never a question for me of if Miami would win a championship with LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. The question really was how many would they win.
Yeah.
Does this team have what it takes to be a dynasty in this current day and age? And when I say dynasty, that means winning 3 championships, even if it's 3 in 4 years or 3 in 5 years.
Yes.
Can they, year in and year out, go through what is a very tough road when everybody is giving you their best punch? And that's what Miami has to deal with on a nightly basis. They're the big draw. Every arena they go to, it's sold out because everybody wants to see that team. I don't think anybody can touch them in the Eastern Conference, but as we know, a year ago, everybody thought Chicago was the favorite, the number 1 seed. Derrick Rose goes down with an injury, and everything changes. So things can change quickly in the NBA. We know that.
Especially in the playoffs. Now, I've got the Heat going through to the finals with a 4-2 victory over the Knicks in the conference finals, for what it's worth. Now, quickly talking about the West, I'm thinking that the Thunder will enter the NBA Finals. They'll defeat the Spurs 4-2 in the conference finals. Who do you think may come out of the West?
Well, we mentioned it earlier. I don't know if Oklahoma City is better than they were a year ago, but they do have that full playoff experience under their belt. The 1-2 punch of Durant and Westbrook is tough to handle. It's tough to match up with. As mentioned, that home court advantage is incredible. I think Oklahoma City gets it done. I think it's going to be a repeat of the Miami-Oklahoma City series from a year ago. And I wonder if the Thunder learn from that experience and do not appear with that deer in the headlights look that we saw quite a bit in the finals last year. I think they have. I think they're ready to take that next step. Are they ready to actually go out and win this thing? That remains to be seen. But if they go toe-to-toe with Miami, I believe it'll be a better series than it was in 2012.
Yeah, excellent. Well said. And I'm picking the Thunder to, inverted commas, upset the Heat 4-3. I'm just the romantic side of the love of the game. I'd love to see it go to 7 games and see the Thunder get their first NBA title, but we'll see how it goes. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today, Ian. I know you're really pressed for time and you've had multiple interviews, so thanks again for chatting to me.
Adam, my pleasure. I hope we can do it again. I want to become the first 3-time guest on the podcast. And that would then be 2 in front of everybody else.
It's been just great speaking to you a second time round, and I'd love to chat again going down into the future. I hope the Nets go deep into the playoffs and you enjoy all the great basketball that's ahead in the lead up to those NBA finals.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, it really is a fun time of year, and thanks for checking in, and it's always nice corresponding with you. Please keep up the great work. Trust me. There are people here in the States that are really enjoying your perspective on things.
That really means a lot. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter @inallairness. Please visit the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.